Hello everyone, welcome to the class of AI. And in today's tutorial, what we are going to learn is Python classes and objects. So this is one of the very important concept in every object-oriented programming language. And yes, Python is an object-oriented programming language, and everything in the Python is an object with its properties and methods. A class is like an object constructor or blueprint for creating an object, right? So let's talk in a layman's language, right? So for example, you have a shape of class, a shape, right? Over there, you can have multiple subclasses and objects, right? Rectangle, circle, triangle, and with multiple properties into it, right? So you can think class as an as a concept which where you can store a lot of things, right? Means such as methods, right? And whenever you instantiate or whenever you create an instance using the object, all the properties, all the methods will be copied into that particular object, right? So I have borrowed this figure from Norwich Hills, and thank you for sharing such a good figure. But let me, before diving into code, how to write your own classes and how to create your objects, let's first discuss these important concepts, right, which I have given as here. So some of the points which we have to discuss: a variable that is defined inside a method of a class can be accessed only by instance of that class called instance variable, right? So for example, if you have created a variable inside your class, that can only be accessed through an instance, through creating an instance, right? If you derive a class from another class such that it has all the characteristics of the parent class, it's called inheritance. For example, if you are deriving one class from another class, so that property particularly is known as inheritance. You are inheriting the properties from other class. For example, you are a byproduct of your mom and dad, right? So you are inheriting the properties from both of them, right? And an object of a class is also known as instance. For example, if your parent are the class, your mother is a class, your father is a class, right? So for example, means whenever you or me or anyone, means whenever we came out of this world, right, we are an instance of our parent, right? So we are inheriting their properties, and I'm basically an object, right? So whenever you create an instance of a class, whenever means I was born, that's called instantiation, right? So basically what we are doing, we are creating an instance of it, right? And that's basically a noun which has been written for this, right? A function that is a part of class definition is known as method. So what I give, for example, function, what we have seen in our lecture, means in tutorial 4th, but when you write a function within the class, that is known as methods, right? So keep in mind the difference between methods and functions, right? So let's see how to create a class. So to create a class, we use a keyword called class, right? And over here you can see I'm creating my class, and with the object a into it, right? And you can see I have created means a class with the keyword name class I have written. And what is the name of my class? That what I have written in my first class, and in that particular first class I have created a variable called a, and in that a I am storing the value of 10, right? So for example, if I run it, you will see my class has been created, because we see there is no error. So now how to use this value, how to access this class, right? So now we can use the class name, my class, right? My first class, basically my first class. So my first class, right? And what I did to create an object, right? So what I did, using the name of the class and using this bracket and then naming it, means assigning that it to a variable, what I'm doing, I'm creating an object of it, right? So that means I'm creating an object which is going to copy each and every property of this class into this object called O1. And if I want to access the value of this a, how I write, because everything is now in OA object of it, I'm going to use print oa.a, because a has a value of 10, and you see the value of 10 will be printed. This is very, very important, guys, right? Now another important part into this classes, that we have to use the init function, which is very important to understand. All classes have a function called init, which always executed when the class is being initiated, basically when you create an object. For example, when I have created an object over here, by default there is an init function, right? Means I have to define it, right? Use the init function to assign the value of object properties or other properties. So for example, if I don't create any object, and whenever this class create any object of it, so for example, if I have created a class called car, right, and I've defined something within it, whenever I call this car, or whenever I create an instance in O1, by default the value of the BMW and 320 will be stored over here. So that means I have not created any instance. Whenever I'm creating any object, by default these values going to be assigned over here. That is the use of basically init function, right? So that means we don't have to assign these values somewhere outside, right? So we use them very easily using the init function. So for example, over here what I did, I have created a car class name called car, and within the definition, means this is a function init. What I'm defining, I'm self means this is the particular first position you have to define self, and then what two thing you are defining as a brand and a model. So self, I am telling that whenever you create this object of this class, the brand should be the brand which I'm going to pass, the model should be the model which I'm going to pass, right? So when over here, when I'm creating an object car BMW 320D, if I'm going to print these things, see, it's going to print BMW and 320, because the instance, when we have called the instance, the value of brand and model automatically came over here, right? Object methods is another important point to understand. Object can also contain methods. So for example, previously we have stored something in the variables, but we can create a functions, but when they are in the classes, they are known as methods, right? So same thing, again the same example, I have created a class called car, but here I'm defining a method called greet. So whenever I call this method greet, that means this particular part will be created, right? So here first I'm creating an object of my class. So object O1 is basically car with BMW 320. So by default the value will be going to be here, but whenever I'm going to print O1.greet, because I'm calling this function through this object, what is going to happen, that when it's going to O1 is over here, the values are assigned, and greet, it will come to this function. So hello, my name is, what is the brand of my car? Brand is BMW, and 322 is my model. So let's see. Hello, my name is BMW and I am 320D. Right? Sometimes people don't like using self, right? So for example, if you don't want to use this self, you can use anything, right? So use self new, right? But make sure you define it at the first position, right? Because if you don't define it as a first position, I'm sure that it's going to give you an error, right? And over here, what I'm doing means, for example, you see in the previous means I'm using the self to pass the values over here, but here I use different ABC means parameter to pass, right? So whenever I call this BMW and 320 using the object, the values will be passed over here. But when I'm calling O1.greet, so greet means going to take a value, because if I am defining it as ABC, then I have to use ABC over here. If I'm going to use self new, then I have to define self new over here to call these objects, right? So if you see again the same output, but I have used a different name as a self new from here itself. If I want to modify any object within my if I have to modify any objects, like for example here I am modifying object O1.models 520D. So you see that I run it, right? So now I have modified the model from 320D to 520D. If I want to delete any object, I just say del O1.model. So I'm going to delete the model. So now if I'm going to run this greet message, because you can see in the greet message what is happening, I'm printing the name of the brand and the model. So definitely it's going to throw an error because it doesn't find a model, because I have previously deleted it. For example, now if I want to delete a whole object which I have created, I create the object, means I have deleted the object, and if I'm going to print O1 because it's not, I've already deleted the O1, so O1 will be not find that, so name O1 is not defined because I've already deleted it. Sometimes what happens that you have to define a class without any body into it, right? So what I'm trying to say that class with nothing inside, but if you do that, it's going to throw an error. So in order to tackle that, this pass statement is very useful. So if you define a class, right, and if you just write the pass statement, the class will be created, right? But the class will be created, it's an empty class, right? So now, for example, if I delete this football class, right, because I will create it now, again I'm creating, and I'm not defining anything as a pass or something over here, and if I'm going to run it to create, it throws an error because this is how the pass is used. So this is the benefit of pass. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you like the tutorial for classes and objects in Python, and thanks for watching Class of AI Python tutorial, and please do subscribe and comment on my channel. Thank you very much.